Kubernetes for Humans.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Kubernetes for Humans podcast. My name is Itiel Schwartz, and today with me in the show we have Idan Gazit. Idan, can you please introduce yourself?
Hi, my name's Idan, and I lead a team at GitHub called GitHub Next, which is the team that originally created GitHub Copilot and then like 50 other things, Copilot Workspace. And I'm going to be like the least knowledgeable about Kubernetes person that this podcast has ever seen because thankfully I got to skip right over most of the Kubernetes time. I was at Heroku where we had our own thing for containers.
If you come from Heroku, like your dislike towards Kubernetes makes more sense. Maybe
I don't dislike hold on, wait. We're starting off on the wrong foot here. I don't dislike Kubernetes. I'm just an idiot. There's a very big difference between those two things.
Yeah, but Kubernetes is so nice that once you get to know him, like you are either an immediate fan or you don't really want you want anything to do with it. And I think Heroku is like in a way the opposite of Kubernetes, like much more opinionated, right? Much more I'll give you what you want. But maybe you share about your like journey story, and then we'll bump maybe into Heroku versus Kubernetes.
Yeah. My journey doesn't make sense at all. It's not. It's all over the place. I'm like a designer slash developer slash product mix.
Mhm.
In English, everybody knows like the idiom jack of all trades, but everybody forgets the back half of the idiom, which is in master of none. So yeah, I've done a little bit of a lot of different things, which is great for my current job where we need to do all kinds of different things as part of chasing how do we make software development better. And of course, how we run our software is a big part of how we make our software. So in that context is where I sort of give a shit about Kubernetes, and it's clearly a dominant way that people package up applications at scale nowadays. And sort of how do we reason about that, and how do we make it so that it's easy to do at scale, but it's also easy to do not at scale. I think the sort of the common critique of Kubernetes is like it's great if you're Google, which obviously that was kind of the point. Less great if you're like, three people, is one of the common failure modes of startups is like, I know we're going to use Kubernetes. And then 3 minutes later, they're just like, oh no, because it's complicated. It's not easy to do things at scale. And it's not always right to take tools for at scale and pretend like you're going to have a good time doing like little, like I have 5 servers. So my journey is all over the place. I know enough to be dangerous in some contexts, but that's about it.
Maybe share like the key highlights, like how did you ended up in Heroku and then GitHub, and like what are like give like the most
Huh.
parts of the journey.
Well, I've always been sort of like, I've always been a web technologies guy, and that led me to I mean, like, because I'm ancient, like the dinosaurs, I got my start in web stuff doing Perl back in the day, like a jillion years ago. And then later, I did all kinds of stuff. And eventually I found my way to the Django community, which is where I really fell in love with the community for the first time.
Like the
Um,
Python Django community, right? Like
eh, eh,
for
yep,
all of our
exactly.
listeners who are not like
Yes,
like
exactly.
Python fanboys, I do like
Mhm.
like Python, but I don't really like Django. It always felt very like a cult kind of framework. Like either you get it or you did or you don't, and I never got it. So yeah, share a bit about that.
So I was eventually I joined the Django core team. I
Mhm.
I fully drank the Kool-Aid. I was a member of the cult.
Really?
And I loved it because for a number of reasons. At the time I remember I was looking at web technologies that were like the post PHP era, right? PHP was like, everybody was just like, "Blah," like all of my logic, all of my display, everything, like, mix all the concerns into one file. The benefit of PHP is that, going from nothing to I have a little web thing was very, very fast. But as soon as you wanted to scale that, it got messy. And so at the time, the response to PHP was Django for Python or Rails for Ruby.
Yeah.
And Rails was obviously very, very popular, but I never really vibed with Ruby, even though I did Perl way back in the day. And I didn't vibe with Rails, like the whole convention over configuration always felt like too much magic to me. Whereas Django put a lot of emphasis on sort of readability, backwards compatibility, documentation. Like when I was getting started with this stuff and I was looking at Rails, the answer was go buy the book, which is fine, but like with Django, it's just like go read the Django documentation, which is really, really good because it was written by a bunch of like English nerds who worked at a newspaper. And so the documentation was really fantastic. And I just loved the culture around how do we make this better? How do we move the web forward? What do we care about making easier? And so that's what led me to get involved with Django. And then on the back of my sort of work in and around the Django community, I ended up at Heroku because there were some other Python people there that I knew, and so yeah, so I spent 5.5, almost 6 years at Heroku. Post Salesforce acquisition, I wasn't there before the acquisition, and then when I left Heroku, I talked with Jason Warner, he was SVP of Eng at Heroku before he left to GitHub a couple years before I left Heroku.
Yeah.
So when I left Heroku, I caught up with Jason. I'm like, "What are you doing?" And he's just like, "Well, I'm starting up this new group at GitHub, the Office of the CTO, and our job is going to be looking at the future of software development. How do we make it better? How do we make software development easier and more accessible to more people?"
I feel.
And I remember asking him, like, "How much does GitHub give a shit about this?" And he was just like, "I don't know. Let's find out." So I was just like, "Okay, cool. I'm in. Let's go." And the rest is, as they say, history. So
So no, like that's a super interesting and indeed unique story. So, now that you know what you know, like, does GitHub like give a shit on that? Like, what's your thesis? What's the company thesis? Like, what really makes like GitHub tick? Like, in the end of the day, it is a big company, right? Like,
yes.
even a very big company. So, share with us your journey there.
Um, I mean, you're right. GitHub is, it's a few thousand people. We're inside Microsoft, which is
Yeah.
many, many thousands of people. I don't remember like how much. I think it's like 200,000 people, all of Microsoft. Order of, I don't know exactly. Um, um, GitHub it's not one thing. At the end of the day, right now, GitHub is where everybody collaborates on code. My job is not to make GitHub. My job is to break GitHub on some level. My job is to figure out what GitHub should be in a couple of years. And it says research in my title, but that's not really true. My job is prototyping, which is not the same as research. Like research is, there's Microsoft research. Their job is to publish papers about like, we found like, an n log n like complexity, like way to search through some data structure. I don't know, like, that's when I think research, that's the kind of stuff I think about. And at Next, our job is, well, we think we figured out something good. And so we build like a shitty version of it as a prototype. And then we can hold that up and say, we believe that this is a bet worth making with the bigger business of GitHub. And if GitHub's leadership agrees with us, if we've done our jobs, we've made the prototype, we've researched it in a user research is like we put it into contact with users. So it's a little bit like building a startup over and over again, but it's small scale and no venture capital and no fundraising, which is great. Um, I just get to focus on what's going to make life better for software developers in any context whatsoever. And I like the fact that my job is to give a shit about the developer experience of everyone. And that's great. I love it. So, um, like broader GitHub is, it's a big business. And
What was
now, with AI being, there's all this energy around AI, and a lot of people are like, oh, it's good or it's bad or whatever. But at the end of the day, even setting aside, whatever people's personal opinions are about AI, I can't point to another technology that gives us higher leverage over the future of development experiences. Like, what other technology am I going to mess around with that's going to deliver as much impact? Like, could it suck? Absolutely. If we don't give enough of a shit to make it good, like, if we give enough of a shit, then we'll make it good and then it won't suck. But like it requires somebody caring. And so that's what we do. And now this is a big part of GitHub's business, like Copilot is a big deal, both revenue wise and, sort of positioning wise. Leadership is very publicly stated, we're an AI company now. And yeah, okay, everybody else is saying that too. But I think in GitHub's case, it actually means something because that technology has such impact on the lives of developers. So, um, so, so yeah, I don't know. It's a messy answer.
in like I think it's like a messy world, but like you said something that it's like building like multiple startups in a single place. Like, what's the main driver? Like, when I think on GitHub, and I'm sure that's not the case, but I think on like a nice UI over like Git, obviously, right? Like that's the core, right? I share, I collaborate. It triggers my CI and CD, which is nice, but like we don't use GitHub Actions, for example. So, like, what will be a good day? What will be a success? What's the main KPI that you guys are striving? Is it to make developers happy, to bring more developers, save time? Yeah, like
Uh,
multiple questions here.
I mean, on some level, my answer is yes.
Mhm.
Yes to everything. Um, there is what GitHub, the bigger business, cares about. I can speak less to that because that's like corporate priorities and there's a bajillion people and whatever's like the message du jour. I'm not going to get in the way of that. My job is not to give a shit about the message today. My job is to look into the future and try to understand what it's going to look like. For example, what if AI could write code alongside me as a developer? Like, is that likely to succeed? No. It wasn't, when we were starting out on that. But if it succeeds, that would be a huge deal, right? And so my job is to scout that out. Our job is not to ship the final product of everything. Our job is to scout away from where the business is today to find new sources of food for us. Um, and to figure out what's going to be good, right? Like, what's a source of food for GitHub? Well, something that has value for developers. So my job is finding value. Um, and like, what's the KPI of that? How many things escape the lab? Like, if we make something and it's good enough that it grows up to be a product that earns revenue, that's success. Um, you know, but the nice part of this is that I get to also care about what makes developers' lives better. In a lot of jobs, caring about revenue is the only thing, right? Like, it's like, did we find revenue? Great. In my case, like, what's good for revenue also has not 100%, but a lot of overlap with what's good for developers. And finding ways to make developers like more powerful, more aware, like of more things, Like, right now, how is my code performing in production? I don't know. Do I have like some kind of monitoring system that's telling me this? Is it good? Did I have to figure out how to monitor it? I don't know. That sucks. What I really want is like while I'm typing my code for like, you know, I think a lot about Iron Man and Jarvis. It's
Oh, cool.
like,
Yeah.
it's like I want Jarvis to be like, I profiled the code that you're typing and it's going to result in like a 30% hit to your Perk 95 latency. That's a bad.
Mhm.
Maybe you don't want to do this, right? I don't want to wait until I've finished like my coding, I've done a PR, everybody's reviewed it, I've merged it, CI ran, my tests were green, and then finally got packaged up and deployed, and then it ran, and only then do I discover, oops, I tanked the performance, right? That's a long time to wait to
Yeah.
find that out. Why? In the future, if I wave a magic wand and I have fantasy developer future, why can't I find that out at development time? Like, so production, like if you think about sort of the software development lifecycle, everything from like, here's where I design and author code. Here's where I collaborate on code. This is what GitHub owns, right? Here's where code runs and how I monitor it. Like, I want all of that to be a holistic thing where like information can flow freely from each stage to all the other stages so that I can be smarter sooner. Um, that's, a good example of like, wave a magic wand. How do I make things better for developers? Make them smarter, sooner, faster.
No, I think it's a very interesting point. When I look at the competition, let's say GitLab, right? Like as like a notable like competition, they are putting a lot of emphasis on the completeness of the solution, or at least they try like to take you from the very boring static code all the way to production. With GitHub, I always feel like it's not really there. It's not really the like production and GitHub to me feel very, very far from one another. So, do you think like it's different? Is it going to change? Is it interesting? Does it make sense?
Um, the shorter answer is I don't know. And also, this is the spicy part. I don't care. Um, um, or it's not really that I don't care. I think I care in the broader business sense.
Yeah.
But like, how complete is our product offering? Like I don't know what the feature matrix looks like between us and GitLab, and that's the part I don't care about because my job is not to like do this feature or this incremental improvement. It is to create a whole new column in this feature matrix that nobody else has.
Mhm.
Um, and so when I think about what that's like, it's like I don't care about refining. This is what I mean when I say my job is not to make GitHub, it's to break GitHub. It's not about refining the product we already have. It's about like taking big jumps forward. These are bets and they're risky bets. And if the rest of the business spent their time like making risky bets, they would fail more often than they want to because part of betting is losing. Um, and the broader business doesn't want to lose, right? Like, it's like, this is where our revenue comes from. We can't afford to mess this up. But the more speculative things that are like further out there, um, those those require, a tolerance for we tried something and we failed. Um,
Give
and we
me
learned.
give me your most like interesting like failure in all of this journey. And you define interesting, like everything goes.
Um, Man, I've got a lot. First of all, like you can go to githubnext.com and you'll see every project that we've worked on,
Mm.
including the ones that we killed. I think that's an important thing. Like part of having a team like Next is being willing to kill your babies, um, uh, like in cold blood.
Mhm.
It's a really important part of it, because like
That
we'll
should be
try.
the quote of the episode. Like I hope you wrote it down. Like killing babies in cold blood. Like this is indeed a surprise.
Well, it's like you work on something and you care about it, you know? It's like you've taken care of it for like, you know, some amount of time. And in many cases you believe that there's value there. It's like there's too much smoke for there not to be a fire
Yep.
um in that direction. But sometimes we just don't got it. Sometimes the tech is not ready. You know, even when I rewind 2 years and I think about, like, you know, you look now at GitHub Spark, which is one of our more recent projects, or it's basically like, what if I could go from natural language to app? We tried this a couple of years ago in the form of a project called Speclang, which was basically like, what if I can compile markdown files into apps, right? And at the time, the models just weren't good enough for it. And also, we didn't have the know-how to like effectively prompt the models into doing this reliably enough. Like it worked 50% of the time, but getting it to work 80-90% of the time is what's needed for it to go from being a toy to being a tool. And so 2 years ago, we couldn't turn it into a tool. Now it's definitely good enough to be a tool in some constrained contexts. Like, would I build consumer facing, super polished apps with Spark? No. But most apps are not that. Most apps, like their competition is a spreadsheet. I want to do something better than Excel for like, you know, the 90% of people. You know, like I need a basic business dashboard. It doesn't need to be super slick. It just needs to be functional and clean, you know? And can I have that? Like a couple of years ago. So was Speckling a failure? At the time, it was just like, well, this failed. We're going to kill it. Um, but was it really a failure? No. Almost always things that we kill are really what I'm trying to like get us to call it just shelving it. I'm sticking it on the shelf because eventually they come back off the shelf in the form of ingredients in future projects. Um, uh, but we also have projects that straight up failed. Like, you know, I worked very hard on a thing called GitHub Blocks for a year. Um, and the idea was like extensibility of GitHub.com itself. Like, what if in addition to just having like renderers, like I have a mermaid file or a YAML file, like, you know, give me,
Yeah.
instead of just here's the text of the file, show me something. But like, what if we could actually have like little apps that run there, right? And so we built this out, and I think we learned a lot about like what a good contract for extensibility would look like. But we just failed to find traction with it. Like, you know, we fielded a technical preview, people played with it, they made some really cool stuff, but not enough that it got GitHub the business to care about it. And I think maybe the important lesson to learn there is, if you're working on innovation things, success is it escaped the lab. Why did it not succeed? It doesn't matter if the reason was the idea wasn't good, the execution wasn't good, the rest of the business had other priorities that still won out over this, or I just couldn't find a way to persuade the rest of the business to go on that adventure. Whatever. The net result is it didn't escape the lab. So it was a failure. Do I feel sad about that? Sure. What would have made me feel happier about it if I'd killed it sooner?
Mhm.
Um,
So
so
you know, I think like in the end of the day, very much like you know, every startup you are trying to find your product market fit, right? Like building something that if it really works, it will be great. The problem, as most startup you know face themselves, is that the line between like huge success and failure is very blurry in the end of the day, right? Like what's your take? How do I know? How do I know that like in a month or a week or whatever, I'm not on the verge of like a huge success for GitHub? How do I decide when to kill the baby in your own words?
uh, it's a good question, and I don't have a flowchart for it. Um, Unfortunately, I would really love to have a flowchart for this. Um, because it really depends on what's the scale of the effort. Not everything at Next is like, there's definitely sort of, let's call it sort of tiers or categories of like, ambition. And really good ideas in like, you need to leave like the nuanced part of this, and business is not good at nuance ever. They always want flowcharts. Is really interesting ideas in the beginning are usually scary and hard to understand. And so you need to leave enough time for them to like figure out their voice and what they want to be. Like, um, and sometimes it's just about like, what's the framing, what's the application, and you need to leave like room for the people, the talent on your team to like figure that out. Um, I think the way that we think about it at Next is um, that increasing traction extends the lifetime. Like we're always hitting reset on like a timer that's always running out. Um, and either something like makes progress and earns another month of life or not. Like, and so we're always thinking about like, okay, like what do we need in order to make progress? Well, we need to prove like this or that part of like the technical thing. Okay, we've succeeded at that. We have another month. Now what? Well, now we need to crack something about the UI of it. Okay, we succeeded at that. What's the next thing? Okay, now we need to start getting more people to use it, not just us. And seeing, so this is the idiom in Hebrew is like, I've discovered America, like, right?
You
This is
can say that.
whatever.
It doesn't work in English. Like I discovered America. It's not a phrase. Both of us are like Israelis, right?
Yeah, so I don't know. I would really like to use this. It's not just I've discovered America. The full
I am not.
idiom is I've discovered America for you. Right? So no, I would really like to use this in English more often, but I don't think folks in America would get it necessarily, because it's like, what do you mean discovered? America's right here all around me. Like, but it's like we've discovered a new continent on the other side of the ocean. For every startup, what I've just described is like, yep, that sounds like Tuesday. Every day at a startup is like that. But so in that sense, it's very, very familiar, but we have a few different efforts going on at once because it's like a startup incubation group. And we have a clear path to production. What we need to do is prove some amount of product market fit. And that's different for different things. And so it depends what's the like ambition. Sometimes the core challenge is in the user experience. Sometimes the core challenge is in the underlying technology, the prompting, the whatever. Very frequently it's both. And so like what's going to extend the timer, or what's going to be the thing that I care about most, it depends on the project. And the only thing I have to say about that is hiring good people means that they're the ones that are in the driver's seat of evaluating like what is the core challenge, what's the thing that we're scoring and measuring based off of. And very frequently there isn't really a measurement to be taken. It's like, is the UX better? Yeah, it's better. How many percent better? I don't know. That's not how UX works. So again, I don't have like a thing, like a yardstick, but I do think in terms of level of ambition. And at the end of the day, I need to stand in front of the company leadership and say, I believe this is a good bet that we should make. Here's why. And they have a working bullshit detector. And so I can't be full of shit. I need to actually be able to support the thesis and say like, look, we thought of this. And so we went out and we conducted user studies. We tested it out. We let people use it. We have telemetry that tells us something about it, whatever. Like, but for every given thing, it's different. If it's a technological thing, it is, my telemetry tells me that like, sort of our prompting strategy is working 80% of the time. And there's low hanging fruit here. We believe that with some effort, it could be raised to 90% of the time. That's like the flavor of sentence that I need to be able to like defend in a conversation with, decision makers. So how do we pick? We pick based off of sort of strategic direction and ambition. Our job is not to take the GitHub that is, but add a feature, but to focus on those more ambitious things. And then within those, it's like for each one, it depends on what the thing is.
The GitHub that can be. That sounds super cool, and I can obviously like relate because we're close into the end of the episode. And I will ask you like the final question that they usually ask, but feel free to elaborate. Like, what's your take on the future? Like, where are we going? What, like, if we're going to talk again in a couple of years, like, what is going to be the biggest trends and so on? That feel free to everything goes.
Well, that's not a big question at all.
Yeah, like
I think a lot about sort of the progression of software in general. It used to be something like, what are trends that we can point to? More people can do it. That doesn't mean like, you'll hear like GitHub's leadership talking about the 1 billion developers goal. They're not talking about a billion more of me and you. They're talking about no, because I don't think a billion people are going to study software engineering and turn into like, Kubernetes nerds. Like, they're talking about lawyers and doctors and school teachers and people that right now don't think that creating software is something that they can do. Um, but with the power of AI coupled with the right interfaces, I'm not saying that they're going to create the kind of software that I create, but they don't want that. They're not here being like, listen, I have a better way to package and deploy software at scale. No, they're like, I need an app to help me schedule like, my daughter's birthday party. And like right now they either use an app that somebody else made or they use nothing or a spreadsheet, right? What's going to like we talk a lot at GitHub Next about lowering the floor and also raising the ceiling. Like for the professional developers, how do we make them able to do more? And for the people who aren't maybe developers or don't see themselves as developers, how do we enable them to even get in the door and do stuff? And so as a trend, 100% the trend is towards more people creating software. And that's also true when you look at it historically. Like once upon a time, to author software, you needed to have like, a PhD in mathematics. And then you punched cards with like, your software and then fed it into a machine. And you had to be super careful with memory and how you use it because there wasn't a lot of it. And now it's just like, the fuck do I care? I'm using JavaScript. It's consuming 80 megabytes just to render this GIF. Like, I don't care about that anymore. The mathematicians at the dawn of our field would weep to see how we abuse memory now. Or maybe not. Maybe they would be very happy. They're like, finally, the future came to pass. So as a trend, more people, it's easier in the sense that power tools makes it easier to build things, right? Like a lot of times people are like, oh, is AI going to replace developers? And I'm like, I don't know. Does like a power saw replace a construction worker? Like that doesn't make sense. It makes that same construction worker able to build more things in the same amount of time, able to build bigger things in the same amount of time, or maybe bigger things that they couldn't build without it. Like, could you build a skyscraper with like a regular hammer and nails? Maybe it would take a zillion years, but with a nail gun, it's like bim, 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 bim. Like, so uh, I think we're headed towards a new age. Like when I look at the history of software development, there have been moments, tipping points. Like, when we moved from the teletype to the terminal. In the beginning, everybody was using the terminals like teletypes. And then eventually people are like, wait a minute, I can edit wherever I want inside the file instead of just on like go to line 43 and apply this regular expression. And then when the GUI was invented, like VS Code was possible on the first day of the GUI. But what did we have on the first day of the GUI? We had Vim in a window, right? Like why didn't we invent immediately like hovers and sidebars and red squigglies and jump to definition and autocomplete and then Copilot and whatever? All of that, well, maybe not the Copilot, but like the rest of that was possible on the first day of the GUI. And so now we're once again at this moment where like there's new tech and it's going to change the capabilities and the interfaces, but we don't know what to use it for yet. I don't believe the next 40 years of software development is going to look like the last 40 years, the GUI chapter. And so it's not a change in display technology, but I think it's just as meaningful. And so I look forward to this future where there's more people that are able to access it. The people that are at the higher end of the field, like, you know, the sort of the not entry level, but the professionals are like every day you go to work and you step into like this like mech suit that enables you to like lift cars and stuff and do more than you could on your own. And that's like the future that I'm aiming for. So they're going to be able to like raise the ceiling on what's possible, while at the same time we're going to have more people coming in and making software that in the beginning, you know, like all the old timers are going to be like, oh, that's shitty software. But to those people, it's incredibly valuable because it helped them schedule their kid's birthday party. So that's what I'm thinking about. And this more holistic take on software that's not just focused on like, well, over here, I care about creation. Over here, I care about collaboration. And over here, I care about operations. I want like all of these to be sandwiched a little closer together so that I'm not thinking about the Kubernetes over here and the VS Code over there and the collaboration in the middle, but as this sort of holistic way of thinking about the authoring, the collaboration, and the deployment of software altogether. So that's what I spent a lot of my time thinking about.
No, that's a great ending. And I think with that we will wrap the episode. Thank you very much, Idan. It's been a pleasure having you. And yeah,
Thank you
that's
for
it.
having me. It was a great time.